Hey guys, today I'm drawing a Indian skull with headdress, otherwise known as a war bonnet. And I'm just starting out with some very simple shapes, just to try and make things easier if you're drawing along. Show you that anybody can draw this. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I kind of draw skulls, although I try and mix them up. A lot of them end up looking a little bit similar, so. And also for this video, if you get one thing, take a look at this skull another artist has drawn. It looks like the headdress is coming right out of the skull's head, like there is no top head. It's cutting right into the head. So if you can learn one thing, get one tip from this video, that is to make sure you draw the whole head of the skull and then place the headdress over top, so it looks like the skull is actually beneath the headdress, because it looks very strange otherwise. As you can see now, I'm drawing right over the skull and imagining the roundness of the skull, so when it's all done, it doesn't just look like it's growing out like a flower pot headdress, right? And I also, quite often when I have hats, I'll intersect an eye on the skull. I just think it looks good to have an eye underneath the hat, or in this case, a headdress. Which, if we're being honest, is a form of a hat, I'd say, to a degree. Very special hat. I'm drawing that's known as a rosette, common on headdresses. Designs on them would probably be beaded. And the headband would definitely be beaded. So just putting in a simple triangle design. It's quite a common motif in Indian art and on the headdresses. But you can get as fancy as you want for this. So I don't know that the teeth worked out quite as well as I'd hoped they would. The bottom teeth look a little more, what's the word? A little more aged, but the top teeth look pretty straight. Probably should have the top teeth looking a little bit more raggedy, I guess you could say. It's okay. So for the feathers, take a little practice, but you're going to want to draw them as quickly as you can. I'm a relatively slow drawer, but if you notice, you gotta just kind of draw them, come out and draw them really quickly, otherwise they'll kind of be a shaky mess. So practice them a little bit and then just kind of bang them off like that. The feathers I've made for this design are very simple. I'd say, if anything, this influence is, it's probably a Sailor Jerry, like the headdress is, not the skull so much, but the headdress is definitely in the Sailor Jerry style, I would say. I wasn't really looking at any at the moment when I made it, but that's what it's kind of influenced by, I think. A couple little beads, and I imagine maybe a little bit of horsehair or something down at the bottom. I'm not really sure. I thought it looks good. And just some simple triangular ornamentation at the top. Just drawing in, after the feathers are done, I put in I guess it's a plume or a piece of hide or, something fluffy, I'm not sure. It's definitely stylized, whatever it is in this headdress. But usually some artists will put in individual little kind of round puffs or plume that look a little more headdress-like. This is more just a stylized one big puff, you could say. There's Sitting Bull, legendary figure. He's wearing a trailer war bonnet, meaning the feathers fall in behind his head. They kind of fall straight back. And that's supposedly his actual war bonnet in a museum. He's probably one of the most famous Indians that ever lived. But most, in battle, roach headdresses are what was worn most. They generally didn't wear war bonnets into battle. Some did. There's accounts. But they usually wore this kind of a porcupine hair roach, which is basically stuck on faux hawk. Not to be confused with an actual mohawk or scalp lock, which some tribes used. This is a halo war bonnet, which is more like a peacock spread of feathers. They kind of just go out in a big oval, in a big halo effect, literally, a big circle. And that's a straight up war bonnet where the feathers just go straight up, just like it sounds. I don't know if that one's as common. It's interesting, actually, to learn about these different. There's a buffalo war bonnet using buffalo horns. Looks pretty cool. But interestingly, there's only about a dozen or so tribes that used headdresses. Most didn't. Most in the American Great Plains region, like the Sioux and the Crow, Cheyenne, Cree, Blackfeet. So you see, like a Hydra headdress is completely different. There's no feathers at all. And here I just added it because it's cool. Look at this Tlingit warrior battle armor. Looks like a samurai. It's pretty neat. And then we all know the mohawk, probably it's got to be the scariest hairdo ever, I would say. That's why in the Second World War, going in Normandy, like the U.S. airborne, all wore mohawks. Scary hairdo. But yeah, it was interesting. Most tribes never used headdresses like this. It was only less than you think. But for the ones that did use them originally, not the ones, some adopted the headdress later because it was in the 1800s, because they were forced into Indian territories with other tribes that were wearing headdresses, and they realized that they were popular with the tourists, so they had started wearing them, but they didn't carry the same significance. Like they just used headdresses sort of as a sign of authority, but they didn't, and even as a fashion statement, but they didn't carry the same spiritual meaning that those original American Plains Indians tribes ascribed to the feathers and the headdress, which was very significant to them. Supposedly, Sitting Bull's, one of the feathers that he commonly wore on his, he usually only wore a couple feathers, was from his father for knocking another tribe in a battle, another guy off his horse with his tomahawk when he's 14 years old, which is pretty interesting. And each feather, supposedly told a story, and they're only worn by men. And maybe they received more feathers for an act of bravery, or, a special skill or act of prowess, or maybe just a gift of gratitude. And they're generally all eagle feathers from an immature golden eagle. And eagle feathers are still sometimes awarded to Plains Indians who serve in the military and do brave deeds today. Here's an Indian girl with a very nice set of feathers. I'm sure you would agree. So, like I said, draw in the feathers as quick as you can. And like I also said, I find it easier to put in the plume part, which is just above the feathers, after I draw the feathers, so then I'm not as worried about lining the feathers up just right. I can kind of just, I get it close, but then I can just come in with the plume and then just line it up with the line of the feathers, which I find easier than having to end the feathers in the right spot every time. Reading a reading a book about Symbol. What's the name? Written about his life. Very fascinating guy. If you get a chance and you're interested in that kind of thing. I'm no historian, but he's most famous for winning the Battle of Little Bighorn against George Custer and his army. And he supposedly also united many different warring tribes, which isn't an easy thing to do. And, basically you're getting together with your enemies to fight one common enemy, which was the U.S. cavalry, which were referred to as Blue Knives by Sitting Bull, because I guess they wore a blue jacket with a bayonet on the end of their gun. But one of the reasons the U.S. cavalry was pretty unstoppable at the time, other than they had more numbers, was that they had what was called the Hotchkiss gun, which was basically looked like on big wooden wheels like a cannon, but it was a big mechanical rotating machine gun shooting these big shells, like shooting a lot of bullets really fast. So it was. And they would roll in with 4 of those things pointed in all different directions, so they couldn't get ambushed. But at the Battle of Little Bighorn, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, they were victorious, which was, it kind of lives in infamy because it wasn't that common for the U.S. cavalry to lose the battle. So just putting in some little details. This is definitely Sailor Jerry style, like I was saying before. It's also in the back of my mind that the fancier I make the feathers now, maybe, you know, the less I'll do with the coloring or the shading. So I'll make them very simple and then try and add a little more depth or a little more color with when I color it. So I'm not as worried about making it too detailed because I know I'll spruce them up a little bit later. Coming in with the big Sharpie, so I don't wear out my little Sharpie. I like a nice Sharpie, like a sharp tip on the Sharpie, but they really don't last that long. So I try and keep them lasting as long as possible, but it's difficult. Oh, and I forgot to mention, stay until the end of the video. I've got a very cool ad from the 1970s that I always enjoyed. I was a little kid in the 70s, but it made an impression on me. And I think if you ask anyone that was conscious in the 1970s, like of an age to remember, and you mention this ad, they will remember it. And I find it relates to this video, so stick around for that. It's coming up shortly. You know, maybe it's a little hokey, but I always liked it. And back in the 70s, keep in mind, people used to just throw things out of the window of their car. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Take care.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.